Welcome to the WFUV Sports edition of RAMily Bonding, our men's basketball program honoring the 1991 and 1971 Rams. With alums today, Chris Carrino and Vince Hartnett. Emmanuel Berbari with you. Guys, thanks for being here.
It's great to be with you. Thanks for having us together, and it's a great celebration.
Yeah, great to see you, Emmanuel. It's always great to reminisce about those great Fordham teams.
Speaking of that reminiscing, why don't we go back to a favorite moment either of you had calling a game for one of those teams?
Vince, I'll let you start.
Okay, well, I'll kick that off. Certainly a highlight, I think, of that season, and there were lots of them, but was as we did get better and better and better popular in New York, it was in New York City. It was coming up to the Notre Dame game at Madison Square Garden. And it was so popular that one of the local commercial radio stations in New York City, sports station, maybe it was 660, had announced that they had also going to be broadcasting the game. So that's when our WFUV team was going head to head with the professional broadcasters. And we just this again, from a broadcasting standpoint, a highlight, knowing that you had to be totally on your game because people are going to be switching back and forth from the dial, and you wanted to make sure you kept your audience.
You know, Emmanuel and Vince, I think the better the team, the more you could have heartbreak in a season. I think the 90-91 team, it was my junior year, and what I remember about that team was no Fordham team had gone to the NCAA tournament since that 71 team. It hasn't happened since, actually. It ends up happening in 92, but that 90-91 team was the first year in the Patriot League. There are definitely moments I remember. I remember going to Notre Dame. Speaking of the Irish and the preseason NIT, that was the first game that team played that year. Getting to visit the campus and play on the campus at Notre Dame for the first time for me was an incredible experience. I remember touring the football stadium there. So that always stood out to start that season. But that season, the first in the Patriot League, was so special because that Fordham team cracked the top 25. They didn't lose a Patriot League game, a conference game until the end of the season. I think they'd won like 13 consecutive games. And Fordham hadn't been to the NCAA tournament since 1971. And you felt that was a tournament team. And they win the Patriot League. They're in the top 25. But the problem was because it was the first year of the Patriot League, they didn't get an automatic bid. So they had to play a play-in game against the Northeast Conference winner. And they go to Laredo, Pennsylvania to take on St. Joe's of Pennsylvania and St. Francis of Pennsylvania, excuse me. And they lose that game. And it was so heartbreaking because they had played so well and you thought they were such a good team, top 25 team. Finally get to, chance to finally get to the NCAA tournament for the first time since the Digger Phelps team. And it ends in such disappointment. And I think the higher the bar for your team, the greater chance there is for heartbreak. I mean, the next year in 92, I was a senior. The team won the Patriot League, got the automatic bid, and went to the NCAA tournament. And that game that they lost in the NCAA tournament, there was no heartbreak, because you were already playing with house money at that point. Mm-hmm. It was just, so I remember that team just being so good and such memorable moments throughout the season. But unfortunately, you remember the losses, and I remember, sound like a coach probably, right? I remember that loss to St. Francis of Pennsylvania out in Laredo. And I remember it vividly. It's amazing. It was a game where we walked into that arena. It was about 2 hours before the game. Now the bus would have to pull up and you'd have to walk through the arena to get to your locker room. And I remember, I think the entire town of Laredo, Pennsylvania was already in the gym 2 hours before the game. There was a rock and roll band that was set up that was playing. And we had to walk along the baseline right in front of the student section to get to the locker room. And we were with the team coming off the bus. And I just remember turning to my partner on the game, the guy Mike Stone, And I said, Mike, I got a bad feeling about this. And we ended up, the Fordham was down big in the first half, made a big run in the second half, but just wasn't enough to win that game. But that's always what stood out to me about that season.
Chris, I'm going to pick up on your number 13, because in the 70-71 team, they won their first 12 games of the year, and it was an unbelievable feeling. And the Temple Owls came into Rose Hill, and we lost our 13th game of the year by 1 point. And you kind of say, well, was the magic spell broken? I mean, that was really great, but no one around here is used to that kind of success. But the team came right back and went back on a tear again. So it was not a painful loss, but it was a scary loss, because we thought maybe the spell was broken.
Yeah, guys, I think being on this call as radio broadcasters, you don't only learn so much by doing the games, but just being around the team, being at practices, traveling with the team. For either of you, Vince with Digger Phelps or Chris with Coach McCarchuk, was there any moment that stands out where you learned something about how to conduct yourself in those settings?
Go ahead, Chris.
Well, I always viewed Nick McCarchuk not just like a basketball coach. I viewed him as one of our professors. I really did. I viewed him like a professor. I learned so much by just, when I would go to practice, he would invite us. He would say, listen, you guys are doing the game. I think you should come out to practice, see what we're all about, see what we're doing. And I would go to practice, and if they would be doing some drills, Coach McCarchuk would come over to me in the stands, sitting there or standing on the sideline, and he would pull up a chair, and we would sit and we would talk for 5 minutes. And he would just explain some of the things they're trying to do, talk about the game coming up or past game. And I think it was something I remember. I was relaying a story earlier. There were a couple of guys doing a game one time that year where they didn't lose many games, but they happened to lose that one. And Nick didn't know those broadcasters, but he had the feed put into their video. So he actually would hear the broadcast when he watched back the video. And he was upset that the announcers were critical. And he came to me and a couple other guys that he knew, and he said, listen, if one of you guys criticizes us, I know that's fair. We probably deserve it because you guys are around. You talk to me, you come to practice, you're on the road with us, you know the deal. So if you criticize us, it's valid. He goes, but I don't want to hear guys on our student station criticizing us if they don't know what we go through on a day in and day out basis. And I've always, from that point on, and in my career now, which, I'm 2 decades into a career in the NBA, I take that same philosophy. I would never say something on the air that I would not say directly to the coach. And I make sure that I speak to the coaches. I'm around guys. I understand what's going on. Not that I want to broadcast things that are some sort of newsworthy things or things that I could have before anybody else. I want to know what not to say. I want to know if I have a valid criticism. Why is he not in the rotation? Well, I know from talking to the coaches that he doesn't fit well, or he doesn't know the plays, or things like that. So I know what not to say. I know the criticisms that are valid and what is just somebody an outsider. You're a broadcaster for the team. You're not an outsider. You have access, so you should make the most of that access to give the people the truth. And if you're around and you have the truth, then coaches can't have any sort of problem with you being critical on the air.
That's a great point. I didn't have as much access as you did to the coaching staff, but you could certainly, I would say that Digger Phelps led by example more than anything else, and how they conducted themselves on campus, on the road, how they handled the publicity they were getting, and that you realize that you're representing the school all the time. So everything you're doing, prepping for a game, doing the broadcast, or just any, and you're going on about the campus, is that always represent the school in the best way you possibly can. And I know he drilled that into the players, and they had to really come up some fortitude for them. And he talked about the 40th anniversary of the team getting together at the Roosevelt Hotel, about how they took one of the road trips, and we didn't go on that. We were a little bit more of a budget back then, and we didn't do all the road games. So we missed the trip to Florida, where we played Miami and Florida. But he told the guys, hey, you're going down to the Deep South. He was especially talking to the black players and said, you're going to see things you've never seen before. So I want you to get the courage to face up to this. It's not going to be easy for you to do this. This is back in 70, 71. And that kind of a leadership position that he took for the team, representing, making sure he protected them, but also representing the university as best he could, was very important to him.
Those teams, obviously some of the most competitive Fordham basketball teams of all time. And such an important point in radio broadcasting is the crowd and the factor of the crowd. What was different about the Rose Hill Gym during those seasons?
Well, I'll kick that one off. We didn't have the improvements that you have today. It was nice to see some of the new seating coming in, but the broadcast box was terrific. Once the game started, I don't think it makes a difference really what venue you're in. I mean, you get into the game, you're focused on the court. The fans obviously add a lot to that, and I don't think Rose Hill had anything that I ever experienced like the noise we heard that year, 70, 71, as we tried to crowd everybody into the gymnasium that we can. But once the game goes, you're into the flow of the game, and the crowd's the background color, but you're focused on what's going on the court.
You know, I always felt that I always looked at Rose Hill as, you know, the Wrigley Field of basketball arenas around the country. And I'll always remember, especially then in that 90-91 team, there was still, even though they had moved from the MAC to the Patriot League, but you still had the local rivalries were really, really ramped up. And I'm talking about the games against Iona, Manhattan, Seton Hall was still on the schedule back then. St. John's was on the schedule back then. In fact, that year, 90-91, Fordham beat Seton Hall, which were coming off they were 2 years removed from going to the NCAA championship game.
That's right.
Fordham actually beat them on campus at Seton Hall. I think it was the last time Fordham ever played Seton Hall on their campus after that. But I remember that game against Iona, and you couldn't fit any more people in the Rose Hill Gym.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think they were standing. We used to do the games from that. I know now you guys do the games courtside. We used to be on that second level, that sort of that balcony behind the Fordham bench, which used to be on the other side from where it is now. And we would be on that balcony, and you had such an incredible view of everything that went on in Rose Hill Gym. And it felt to me like people were hanging off the balcony. You know, there were so many people, you couldn't fit any more people. And I remember it used to get so warm in there when you had one of those local rivalry games, and fans from both sides showed up, and there was nothing. I go to all these stadiums and NBA arenas and college arenas. There was nothing like a local rivalry game that year at Rose Hill, when the place was just had them all shoehorned in. It was an incredible environment.
Chris Carrino from that 91 season, Vince Hartnett from 71. Guys, great reflections, and thanks so much for taking the time to be with us.
Emmanuel, thanks for having us.
Emmanuel,
it's always great
you.
to reminisce.